All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all who are joining us. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the Scaling Up Nutrient-Enriched Food Through Policy webinar with a keen focus on public support systems. My name is Gillian Makungu. I work with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition as a communication associate for the commercialization of biofortified crops program. This webinar is co-hosted by Gain and Harvest Plus through its partnership program, the commercialization of biofortified crops. The program works with commercial value chain actors, including seed producers, farmers, aggregators, and processors to catalyze commercial markets for nutrient-enriched seeds, grains, and food products. And our focus countries are Bangladesh, India, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Tanzania. Through this program, we aim to enhance food systems so that they can deliver nutrition cost effectively and sustainably to all people. We acknowledge that solutions to addressing hidden hunger can best be found when there is a strong policy push, an enabling environment, and implementation push from the policymakers. And today we will be having a dialogue with some of the policymakers from India, Nigeria, and Pakistan. These panelists will highlight the potential and progress of tapping into public distribution and public procurement systems. Example being school feeding programs for them to expand the reach of biofortified crops and foods to vulnerable populations on a large scale. We will also identify opportunities and challenges to engaging public procurement and distribution systems, and how to meet the supply challenge they usually pose. So to fill you in on the webinar logistics, first of all, we do have Josh Knowles. Josh, how are you? You can just wave to the rest of the audience. So Josh will be drawing and scribing as we proceed with the discussions to give us summaries of these discussions. And this webinar will also be recorded, and it's being live streamed on the GAIN YouTube channel. My colleague Safiria will post the link on the chat. I would like to encourage all of you to share the link on your networks so that those who are not able to join us here are able to view on YouTube. I'd like to encourage all the attendees to pose questions for speakers through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And my colleagues Mawish and Sanya will direct those to the moderator, which will be addressed during the Q&A session. And finally, for the speakers, kindly ensure that your microphone is off unless you are speaking. So to help us shape the agenda of this day, I would like to welcome Rewa Shankar Misra. Rewa is the head of National Policy and Innovative Finance at Harvest Plus IFPRI. She is responsible for supporting the scale up of biofortification through policy and partnerships with governments and multilateral financial institutions. Through her work, she helps to develop public, private investment and technical support models that can enable a strong ecosystem for nutrition and climate smart agriculture. Prior to Harvest Plus, Rewa worked with the MasterCard Foundation, leading a $200 million rural and agriculture financing portfolio. She started a career with the Reserve Bank of India and the UN. She is a development economist and holds a master's degree in development economics from Georgetown University. Rewa, the mic is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Gillian, and welcome to all our esteemed panelists and a great audience from registered from around 50 countries around the world. So it's very exciting today to be joining you on this panel focusing on scaling up nutrient-enriched foods through policy, and particularly focusing on the role of public support programs. So, as Gillian's already given a very strong introduction, so just to note that I'm Rewa Mishra, and I in particular anchor a project at Harvest Plus supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that works on scaling biofortification through partnerships with national governments and through country ownership. So I'm very excited to welcome the panel here today. We know that this particular session is extremely timely. COVID-19 has dramatically increased the number of people living in food and nutrition insecurity globally. And governments had already been pivoting to increase the nutrition objectives or to impact the nutrition objectives of public support programs, such as school feeding, public distribution, and integrating nutrient-enriched foods in such programs is a key approach to strengthening the nutrition response of public procurement. So today we are joined in speaking order by Obe Nkea, who is the Senior Advisor of Food Systems Transformation at GAIN, Anant Arora, who is the Senior Director, Akshay Patra Foundation. We're also joined by Dr. Khwaja Masood Ahmed, who's the National Coordinator, Nutrition and National Fortification Alliance from the Government of Pakistan, and then Dr. Edna Akpan, who's the Director of Commercial Farm from the Government of Nigeria. So I'm very excited to welcome our panelists. And Gillian already touched upon the format of the panel. We're going to keep things very discursive, so there are no formal presentations. Rather, what we'll be doing is I'll be posing questions to panelists, and panelists are requested to bring insights from their specific country contexts. We have a great mix of really important country models, national models for scaling nutrition within public procurement. So, what I would suggest is two panelists, that we start with a general statement. It'd be helpful to understand, for example, for the purpose of the audience, what is the potential outreach or impact of including nutrient-enriched, particularly biofortified grain and food in public procurement across your countries. And then we move forward to specific responses to some leading questions, which I'm going to articulate by country. And each of you would have approximately 10 minutes of speaking time. While you're speaking, I'll keep my video off. And when you see my video come on, you'll know that it's time to close your responses. Shall we start off? So let's start with Obe. Obe, I think, we're very excited to look at developments in Tanzania when it comes to enhancing the nutrition quality of public procurement. Could you talk a little bit to the policy support for this area, just to frame the area for our audience? And we know that the Tanzanian government is strongly committed to advancing biofortification, such as through the recently adopted National Biofortification Guidelines. Do you see this commitment helping to facilitate school feeding linkages?
Thank you very much, Rewa. Just to put it into context, first of all, is to say policy and legal framework are very, very key in shaping the public systems in terms of nutrient-dense food. So in terms of Tanzania, I can put in place, I think, 3 main policies which have been really important is in shaping the biofortification in the country. So looking at the agriculture policy of 2013, which really, among other things, comes up with the statement of how to increase production of nutrient-dense food. This resulted into agriculture sector development program, which is the overall framework, shaping on, some of the interventions key to support the implementation of the policy. And what has happened in this agriculture sector development program has really come out with more lower policy framework, which shape now exactly the nutrition sensitive agriculture as the important areas. One is national nutrition sensitive agriculture action plan, which has just been launched. But the second one is biofortification guidelines, which really gives the overall guide on production, processing, aggregation, and consumption of biofortification within the market, whether being a public, through the public system or through the normal market. So the guidelines have been issued and they are now under implementation, and they are really, we are seeing them as a very, very important key framework to shape the consumption and increase of the production of nutrient food. The second, of course, this policy also helped to support the release of biofortified varieties, which are now in the country, like 3 of the value chain in terms of the orange flesh potatoes, like 6 varieties, 2 varieties of PVA maize, and high rich iron beans, 2 varieties. And now the CBC program is now commercializing these varieties. The second policy I want to highlight is the education policy, which is shaped also on the issue of school feeding. How can school be fed with the nutrient food, including biofortification? So out of that, we see the school feeding guidelines be developed, which really issues the framework on what should the kids eat at school, who should feed the kids and with what. So we see also biofortification coming in very, very strongly in that guideline. So we are seeing it as a framework which is helping to shape the consumption of the fortified food within the systems, within the public school systems and all that. But I think we have food and nutrition policy, which also come in with the focus of how to shape the nutrition agenda and food in the country. And out of that, we have the National Multi-Sector Nutrition Action Plan. We have just concluded implementing a first phase, and we have just launched the second phase. And in that, biofortification has been identified as really key important interventions to fight the hidden hunger. And indeed, micronutrients deficiency is one of the key result area in the second National Multi-Sector Nutrition Action Plan. So all of these have helped to put in place how now the system should work towards consumption of nutrient-dense food, and biofortification is following that. But the important thing which we are seeing as really helping us, for example, as a CBC program, especially through what we call the institutional pathway, in which we are focusing more of the school, is the circular which was issued by the President Office to all the schools and the procurement systems to purchase fortified and biofortified foods wherever it's available. So what we are trying to do within this project is to make them available and create more demand for them to be consumed. So this circular has really helped us to say, okay, this is our entry point. The schools have entry point, and they are now really using that to purchase food through that. So I think in terms of that policy, I'll mention those 3 ones, and they've really shaped the agenda of also public procurement through our institutional pathway. But really, it doesn't go, it can't go without getting some things right. So I'm seeing really for us to be able to move forward or to be able to consolidate all this. Of course, one of the lessons we are seeing is government directives are important. We are seeing we have to fill the knowledge gap. There is a lot of knowledge gap and misinformation. If that continue, if we don't fill it, we are going to see issues. But we need really to see how to link all the actors from the production to consumption system, and we have to get the prices right. Because if the prices are higher than what the people are used to consume, it will not be really enticing to continue buying this one, although they have the nutrition value. Because if they, for lower income people, nutrition maybe comes later rather than really getting the food in the place. So we see the potential of feedings of really many people engaging into consumption of this nutrient-dense food, especially biofortified food. And given the nature of the country with diverse agroecological zone where maize and beans, the value chain we are promoting can grow in almost everywhere, and beans maybe twice a year, we are seeing really a lot of consumption in future, and even going beyond the regions we are focused. We are focusing 9 regions out of 26, but because this is a commercialization, you can see that it's going beyond the the focused region. So we will see more than, maybe at the end of the project, more than around 3 million. That's what we are targeting, but really we can go beyond this. And the market approach which has been used, it is really helping to shape the agenda in terms of all that and sustainability as well. So to me, really, I'm seeing the policies and the legal framework forms an important component in making sure really the procurement, public procurement becomes important, and really making sure more people consume these biofortified products. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Obe. Those were really, I think, critical points that you've raised, and you particularly highlighted the element of school feeding and how that could be integrating biofortified grain. There could be a really critical entry point to ensuring, not just nutrition enrichment for this generation, but for the next. And continuing that theme, our second speaker, Anant Arora, is joining us from Akshay Patra Foundation, India. And Akshay Patra Foundation is a key partner of the Government of India in national school feeding. So Anant, over to you. I'd request all the speakers to talk, to begin with a response to the general question, what is the potential outreach or impact of including biofortified grain and food in public procurement? And for you, Anant, in particular, a couple of questions. One is that, we're very excited that India's Prime Minister, Honorable Narendra Modi, has come out in favor of biofortification and endorsed biofortification crops as a priority strategy for addressing malnutrition. Do you see increased formal policy support and see this building momentum for integrating biofortified grain in school feeding overall? And we know that India runs one of the largest school feeding programs in the world. What is being done to test the feasibility of integrating biofortification in school feeding? So over to you, Anant.
Yeah, thanks so much, Reva, and thanks for getting us all together. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I think we've got a variety of us here from all over the world. Yeah, so I'll just give you a small kind of background on what's happening in India. So the public procurement and distribution system, it's been an important element in, I would say, the India's food security net almost for the last 50 years. And it's quite evolved. Uh, Broadly, if I were to kind of break it up into three pillars, yeah. So you can you can say the existing mechanisms. Uh, in fact, some years back, 5, 6 years back, it actually became a National Food Security Act, which in the country is almost it's like law, which kind of ensured that you have to ensure food and nutrition security for the most vulnerable. So three pillars to it. One, which covers pregnant women and children till 6 years of age. Um, and broadly, it's about supplementing nutrition, also called the integrated ICDS, Integrated Child Development Scheme. Then you have children from age 6 years to adolescents up to 14 years, covered under a school meals program called the midday meal program here. Now slightly changed to an integrated. I will just kind of speak on that. And thirdly, we have the public distribution. We call it the public distribution system here, which covers all family members, vulnerable, and the food insecure population. Um, in terms of, I would say, the scale, just to give you an idea about between paddy, rice, and wheat, it consumes around 800 lakh metric tons for kind of 100. Yeah, so that's the amount of movement it does. In terms of population between these three programs, it covers around very close to 800 million people. That's the reach of the entire program, and I would say pretty arrived, aided by technology, universally kind of allowed and accepted. Beyond, I would kind of in terms of say in fact in terms of policy commitment and enablement, almost each one of them, all three of them, in the recent announcement, while they were run by various ministries, have got integrated into one common, I would say, common, you can say, I mean, we can call it a special purpose vehicle led by the Prime Minister himself, yeah, under a Prime Minister kind of an food feeding program. And so much so that right from 2019, the pilot programs have been going on for inclusion of fortified grains in almost all parts of the country. The recently announced, in fact, on this on the World Food Day, the Prime Minister himself announced launch of something like 17 seeds, and which are both the natural crops across the country, and even in terms of I would say, for example, the midday meal program, which caters to around 110 million children across the country. We should be getting, we've almost like kind of, almost ready to receive a first lot of fortified rice, and millets are about to be introduced. Also for some academic information, government ensures a minimum support price to buy from the farmers for the conventional grains, which it is almost kind of extending it for the other kind of, you can say, crops which are rich on micronutrients. It has also launched a subsidy scheme where the millers, the rice millers or the wheat millers, would actually be kind of fortifying the conventional part of it. They would be subsidized by the government directly for any additional cost which comes onto them. And the Prime Minister has kind of made a comment that by 2024, the complete public distribution system, yeah, would actually be supplied with fortified rice, and how things have been going. Uh, I mean, how things have been going, and kind of how he operates. I definitely see 2024 maybe possibly becoming a 2023 and not 25. Yeah. Parallelly, one is seeing a large amount of involvement. Uh, um, I mean, in fact, there have been close to 20 studies across the world, with 4 from India, and I mean, there are kind of strong. If we were to just look at suitability and some parameters, so right from consumption, whether how much does it cover. Yeah, so it almost like covers the like, let's say if I were to take an example only for rice, I mean, we are the world's second largest producer of rice. It meets 31% of the population's energy intake. If you were to look at coverage, I mean, it reaches to, it's a staple food for almost 70% of Indian population. Acceptability, it's pretty well acceptable. The taste and aroma of the fortified product, that you can't distinguish from unfortified rice. If you look at stability, I think it can be stored as normal rice without any loss of nutrition. Evidence is proven. Technology is simple, cost effective. I mean, we use extrusion technology in India, and shelf life, absolutely, not a problem. So I think overall there is a great amount of participation, enthusiasm, both through policy, advocacy, between both, and there is, like, for example, there is absolutely no kind of a political, I would say, I mean, while you may have different kind of this, but everything else is on. So that way, I think pretty well on the path. Coming to Reva, answering your question about feasibility. So I mean, I would rather say that there is almost now a push from the government at a policy level, and for us here, what happens in the school meals program is the grains are supplied by a central body, which is called the Food Corporation of India. And those are the ones which actually are going to be kind of supplying across the country. So, distribution is not a challenge. I mean, you don't really actually kind of have a choice. There is no additional cost which is coming on to us. So I think from purely, if I were to look from a supply side, there is a good comment. Demand side, it's anyway very pretty large scale. So I think fits on our bill very, very well. Yeah, very, very well. Possibly a second, I mean, answering your second question around feasibility, around the Prime Minister's comment, and how does it really help? I think he's been very, very kind of clear in terms of it. I mean, the World Food Day, he actually kind of made few statements, and took this to saying these are now nation's 17 recently developed biofortified seed varieties of 8 local and traditional crops. Have said that this is an important step in our fight against malnutrition, and we are encouraging the production of crops which are rich in nutritional substance. So I think with right from kind of looking at what all could be constraints, he's kind of addressed them pretty straight, from the millers saying it might cost me additional, to the people like us on the implementation side saying, where do I get it? Where do I procure from? He's addressed kind of all these questions. So I think it's quite a big help, and I think we really appreciate the government's urgency and key policy actions in this. And I think I mean we have a Apex you can call it a planning or planning body here in the country. That's been also kind of the CEO of that has been also been stressing on the fact of these kind of really kind of moving the shift to this, and I think we have pretty arrived family health surveys which kind of continue to happen, pretty detailed ones, and I think there's been very strong commit to kind of really kind of get over them on a yesterday basis. Yeah. Yes, Rema. Seems you are muted.
Thanks, Anand. Very important points and a great overview of public support programs in India, and particularly the increased focus within school feeding on nutritionally enriched crops and grain. So I'd also like to take this opportunity to announce an exciting new partnership between Harvest Plus and Akshay Patra Foundation. And this is going to focus on integrating biofortified grain in school feeding programs. And we're very excited to actually test for the first time a very structured feasibility for integrating biofortified grain in school feeding, particularly through grains like millets and zinc wheat. So that's a really exciting initiative. And as we move forward, our next speaker, Dr. Khwaja Masood Ahmad, over to you. I'd like to pose, just as I have to other speakers, a couple of questions. And if you could start by talking a little bit about the potential outreach of including biofortified grain and food in public procurement in Pakistan, and then to talk a little bit to what you consider the most promising opportunities for integrating biofortified crops and food in public assistance programs, and what kind of challenges do you think you may face in this context as well? So to provide perspective on those areas from your side.
Thank you very much, Riva. The dynamics in Pakistan are a bit different than India and other regional countries. Basically, I will go through some of the baseline statistics, and then I will come to the actual biofortification component. In Pakistan, basically, wheat flour is the main staple food, and the focus in the past had been on large-scale food fortification, mixing of vitamin mineral premix in the wheat flour. For the last maybe 2 to 3 decades, the efforts have been towards fortifying the wheat flour with iron, folic acids, etc. Initially, and then in the last few years, the standards were revised to include zinc and vitamin B12. So main focus, apart from wheat flour, was on large-scale food fortification, in spite of the fact that biofortification has been included in the 12th five-year plan by the government. Another main documents like multi-sectoral strategy at the national level, as well as even the food fortification strategy at the national level. Biofortification is a component. But it was not elaborated in detail as it should have been, because as I mentioned, the focus was on basically the large-scale food fortification. Secondly, as per se, there are no public feeding programs as such, like the school feeding or any other feeding. However, at different emergencies, whether these are natural or man-made or other disasters, these food supplies usually happen, but these are in the form of raw material. The wheat flour, pulses, etc. And again, it is the effort of the partners, etc. The focus again have been on providing these rations to the vulnerable families which are affected by the emergencies, make sure that these rations are fortified, whether it is salt, oil, or wheat flour. So uh, practically, biofortification did not exist in the previous decade, but in the early decade of 2000 and before that. But for the last 10 years or so, the focus has slightly shifted to biofortification. Multiple reasons. The large scale food fortification, especially for wheat flour, did not work as effectively as was perceived initially, like the effective large scale fortification of oil or salt. Plus, there have been multiple issues with the availability of wheat flour. Here, I must tell that in Pakistan, as Anand mentioned about India, almost 30 to 40% of wheat grain is procured by the government to ensure food security, price of the wheat grain and wheat flour, and as well as counter any shortages or any holding, etc. So this is a very important component that I will be discussing later on, that can facilitate and be a sort of a positive point for biofortification of wheat with zinc. So as I was going to start that, about 10 years back, Harvest Plus started working in Pakistan with the national government research institutes and the ministry at the national level in zinc fortification. And during the last decade or so, the first zinc biofortified variety was developed and tested in the field in 2016. And now we also have a second one in 2019, and the third one is also in pipeline. Thanks to Harvest Plus support, as well as later on GAIN also supported in not only the commercialization as well as communication along with the provincial and federal governments. So as I mentioned, it's a very recent development in Pakistan. Uh, we do have food distribution networks, but these are mainly by the charity organization or philanthropy, not mainly by the public food distributions. And these food distribution networks also focus on fortified staple food, as I mentioned earlier. Not they do not have the linkages with the biofortified crops as yet. Um, After 2016, since the introduction of zinc fortified wheat, things are moving very gradually but rapidly also in the positive direction. And the uh, amount of zinc fortified seed and the crop produced by that zinc fortified seed, biofortified seed, is gradually increasing in quantity and very appreciably, to the extent that we do hope that during the current season starting next month, almost 10% plus uh, wheat grain produced in Pakistan would be zinc fortified. Again, as I mentioned, thanks to Harvest Plus and efforts of GAIN, as well as the support by the federal Ministry of Food Security, as well as provincial food departments. So why I'm mentioning these two ministries and departments is that these are the ministries and departments which are responsible for public procurement of that about 30-40% of the wheat grain. Initially, the focus was to motivate the farmers to grow biofortified, zinc biofortified wheat, and the response was positive with the support of the provincial agriculture and food departments. And very recently, the federal government has also included that in its seed list, especially the Punjab government also, because most I would like to highlight that Punjab is the largest province of the country with almost 60% of the population, and similarly, uh, 100 million plus population, and similarly, the major bulk of wheat grain, almost 12 to 15 million metric tons, is produced in Punjab. So when the policies are developed at the federal level and in Punjab, it means that they would affect the major chunk of the production. So in the very recent couple of years, as not only the production of biofortified zinc has increased appreciably, the recent policies of wheat distribution and crop production policies have also included biofortified zinc as a major component. So this was the first step. Now there are the future plans that would benefit the vulnerable population. We have plans to link these farmers with the food distribution networks, which in the past have been linked with the millers who produced fortified wheat flour, because there have been ups and downs in fortification. So linking these farmers to those food distribution networks and getting an agreement with the millers that they use the zinc biofortified wheat would be one step by use of using the zinc fortified wheat crop for the vulnerable population. Secondly, discussion is also going on with the provincial and federal government that they should give special incentives or priority to those farmers who produce zinc fortified wheat for the public procurement. And this would have double effect. First, that the wheat grain that would be in the government and custody for use in time of need and supply to maintain the cost and availability of wheat flour would be fortified, and it would benefit the general public because this wheat grain is provided to millers on subsidized rate, thus reducing the cost of wheat flour for especially the vulnerable population, the poor population, the far-flung areas, and also in the federal regions which are quite far away from the central establishment, as well as which do not have any production of wheat. So these two are the main priorities that we have highlighted. A few words about National Fortification Alliance. This alliance was initially constituted in 2003 to oversee all the fortification activities. And initially, we did not focus much on the biofortification, but as I mentioned recently, biofortification has been included in the mandate of National Fortification Alliance, along with other efforts for elimination of micronutrient deficiencies or hidden hunger. So, under the ambit of Ministry of Health, this alliance is also working with the partners, Harvest Plus, GAIN, and other private as well as public departments to facilitate not only the increase in the production of zinc fortified wheat grain, but also make sure that whatever is produced is procured by the government and utilized for the vulnerable population. And we do hope that these efforts would cherish in the next couple of years. And I don't see immediately the challenges. Definitely, um, breaking the circle of which is there for decades is difficult, and initially we may find some difficulty convincing the food departments to only focus on the zinc fortified or make it a priority or give them special incentives. But with the efforts that we have started, I think we would be able to overcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Really important insights on both the public procurement system, but also the supply side on biofortified grain and what strategies could work to really scale zinc wheat within the public procurement system. So with that, saving and dare I say saving the best for last, Dr. Edna Akpan, who's the Director of Commercial Farms for the Akwa Ibom State Technical Committee on Agriculture and Food Sufficiency, Government of Nigeria. So, Dr. Akpan, over to you. I'd like to tee up a couple of questions for you. So one is, what do you consider the most promising avenues for integrating biofortified crops food in your state? Within public assistance programs? And secondly, what supply chain challenges will need to be addressed to ensure consistent supply at an acceptable price? And what knowledge challenges do you think will need to be addressed to ensure consistent demand from public programs? So over to you, Dr. Akpan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Akpan, Edna Akpan from Nigeria. I work with Akwa Ibom State University as the director of the commercial farm and a member of the State Technical Committee on Agriculture and Food Sufficiency. I'm equally a Harvest Plus Gain CBC coordinator for Cross River State. So I am privileged to be here today to talk on the emerging, promising, avenues of integrating and the challenges in engaging with public procurement and distribution systems. There are lofty opportunities that are abound here in Nigeria because the issue of commercialization of biofortified crops had been on ground for a while, and it had been, carefully and tactfully handled by the federal, the state government, and even individuals and organizations that are willing and ready to do such. And in the area of value chain, a lot had been done in the area of value chain approach, especially in area of cassava, vitamin A cassava, vitamin A maize, and orange flesh sweet potato, because those are the major staple foods or crops that are being saddled with biofortification here in Nigeria. And the root crops research institutes and the cereals research institutes are doing a tremendous job in making sure that this biofortified nutrient-rich crops are readily available within the reach of the poorest of the poor, and almost every household here in Nigeria. And there is no state in Nigeria that have not been part of this lofty project that is about. Apart from that, mainstreaming biofortification into the federal and the state ministries is still in progress, because at the federal level, it had already been done. In the state level, the state committees on food and nutrition had been established in all the states, and then the follow-up on all biofortification programs in the states here in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, we have also undergone the school feeding programs, and most of the ministries of agriculture and women affairs have also been involved in homegrown garden programs where biofortification of crops takes the lead. So for me and for us here in Nigeria, I think that a lot of opportunities is on ground, because a lot of people have keyed into this value chain, from the stem and seed producers to aggregators and to producers, the bulking agents, then the marketers, processors, and the entire value chain. And the market is gradually opening so that a lot of people have keyed into it in one way or the other, and at the same time has helped to improve the income and nutrition state of the people here in Nigeria. And we have the pat on the back from the government because of the support, and they also have a budget line for biofortification of crops in Nigeria. So in the northern part of Nigeria, they've done a lot on the seeds, especially on vitamin A maize, but down here in the south and southwestern part and the middle belt, we have done so much in the area of pro-vitamin A cassava, orange flesh sweet potato, and vitamin A maize. So I am of the opinion that, with good legislation and lobbying is equally involved when it comes to lofty programs like this, so that it could be, given the right pride of place. I believe that with so much awareness creation and sensitization, in schools, in public places, everywhere, and then in gatherings, even at exhibitions and so on, Harvest Plus had always taken the lead. So I believe that we need to set up policies. A lot of policies have been set up to integrate it into the school system. And the good news is that, like in Akwa Ibom State in particular, all the schools have been given biofortified seeds, and they have cultivated them in their various schools, and they've also harvested. While most of the biofortified crops here are also used in the school feeding program. So there are so many opportunities that are bound, but the good on the other way, we are also looking at the challenges. For vitamin A maize, it's easier to convey from one location to the other. But in terms of vitamin A, provitamin A cassava, it's a little bit bulky. That's a little challenge, more challenge, to move it from one location to the other. But the level of adoption and the level of diffusion is very high. And the other partners in the country, CBC partners, Harvest Plus and GAIN partners in Nigeria, are working as a team to be sure that biofortified crops gets to the poorest of the poor in the rural areas and unassessed areas in the country. And you see, improving the nutritional states of the people also, and production of the nutrient staple foods also help to reduce the malnutrition status of some of the people, especially in the riverine area. Then a lot of youths too have keyed into this by adding value, to the biofortified crops and then making money from there, and we are having them now in the shelves in most of the supermarkets around. And then we have a lot of processors that are coming on board, and big-time multinational processors and producers that are coming on board. Large hectareages have been cultivated in diverse locations, multi-locations across Nigeria, and I believe that the government will continue to support and keep the budget line for biofortification here in Nigeria. For us, it's a plus for us in Nigeria as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akpan. That was a very interesting presentation, and it's exciting to see what your state is doing when it comes to integrating nutrient-enriched crops in their public procurement systems. With that, I'd just like to very quickly, before we head into the Q&A, thank all the panelists, because I think this was an extremely engaging and complementary set of presentations focusing on different dimensions of public assistance programs, right from the national level to the state level, and the kinds of opportunities and challenges presented there. So with that, I'd just like to quickly go over what we're doing for the rest of the session. We have a fair number of questions that we're trying to get through, and we have just about 10 to 15 minutes to take up some critical questions. I'll be directing audience questions to our panelists. And I'll start with one which is more general. And then after that, we will take 5 minutes with our live illustrator, Josh Knowles, to go over some of the key points of the session. Following which, GAIN project manager, Ijudai Jasada, will be providing a wrap up on the session. So in terms of going into audience questions, I'd like to start with a question which is more generally for all panelists. It's not country specific. And that is to say, do you think there's a gap in investment and research on enhancing the nutritional content of traditional varieties, which could also support in preserving biodiversity? And this question, of course, touches upon an area which is more the background R&D required to really continue to make available nutritionally enriched varieties, going kind of beyond the aspect of supply and demand for public procurement, but I leave it open to the panelists to whoever may like to take that question. So if we have any volunteers, please go ahead.
May I respond to it first? And the simple answer is yes. I mean, definitely there is need for more research in the enrichment of the available crops in whichever is being used in the part of the world. Um Not only the enrichment of the crops, but also the post-enrichment consequences like the bioavailability, absorption, etc. So for me, more and more research is required. Very recently, I also found out that there has been experimentation in Pakistan about vitamin A biofortification of maize, and unfortunately, this has not been adopted by the farmers or the provinces, in spite of the fact that it was quite a long time ago when this research was carried out, and this fortified maize was produced at the federal level in Pakistan. So not only more and more research is required, but also there is a need to create awareness and capacity building of the policymakers about the benefits, as well as the farmers, so that they can utilize it, the research findings and the modified crops for better production, increased productivity, as well as increased nutrition status. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important point in terms of ensuring that farmers actually have access to a refreshed pipeline of varieties which are nutritionally enhanced over time. The next question is specifically for Tanzania. So Obe, over to you. The question is, what is the current status and way forward? How does the school feeding program and integration of biofortification there plan to change and contribute to the larger picture of improving nutritional status of the country? I think this is just a question on broad impact potential and some reflections on sort of, what is currently happening in terms of the scale of integration and the immediate future plans.
Oh, thank you very much. I think we started a little bit low to, to create demand within school after the secular. And in the regions we are working, the uptake has really increased from the schools. And now, at least, because we started with no school was taking, but now I think we have more than 20 schools which are taking, which is more than to begin with, more than 20,000 children. Because initially we didn't want to create false demand because of seasonalities, but at least now the harvest is there. We continue generating demand, and for future we know the production will be there. We have to balance demand and supply. So the uptake is really encouraging, and I don't see it as a big issue. Of course, we need to continue addressing some of the knowledge gap and beliefs which are still there among some people, even the policymakers. But I think I see the schools as the good vehicle, because we have children from the primary schools to secondary schools, which we are targeting. And this is a group of mostly adolescents. So we are building their future of more, kids, the future parents who are more nutritious than maybe where we came from. So that's point number one. But the second one, we believe schools, most of these children who are in school, they may have the parents who are still in the reproductive age. So they tend to go home with the message to say what can be done. So that message is move also from schools to home, and home can be, be to adapt this from the children who are coming from school. They learn a lot and they believe their teachers, sometimes more than the parents. So we see the impact spreading from school to the bigger household, even for those who are not in school. So the future to me, school is important in those two aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Obe. And just a very quick two-part question for Anant Arora. These questions, I think partly, Anant, you answered it in your presentation. The first is, which staples can be biofortified and captured through the MDM program? And I think you highlighted the role of millets and wheat. The second part of the question is, what role can the private sector play in this broad integration of biofortified grain in school feeding? So over to you to respond to that audience question.
You are muted.
Yeah. So just to quickly respond to the first part, in fact, we kind of already moved close to 40% of rice and wheat, which is fortified in the program. And in terms of scale, I would say we serve 2 billion children every day, and 40% of it is already, kind of in pipeline. We've been working on it. So millets are now the third ones which are coming away, and we expect that to get integrated into the menus. In fact, one of on collaboration with Harvest Plus, and we have also a collaboration with the Indian Institute of Science, which is one of the world's premier research institute. One of the clear objectives is to kind of jointly work and engage on creating sharing data with governments, private sector stakeholders on the opportunity, the impacts of cost benefits of a nutritionally enhanced midday meal program. Answering your second one, Reva, on how the private sector is, in fact, this very kind of an expert committee which we've got together, which is a combination of academia, industry, policy makers. I think we're seeing a large amount of traction, including obviously the leading food producers in the country, which are coming together, both in terms of, I would say, in terms of helping governments invest in research, including, I would say, doing a lot of action research, in kind of doing some research, implementing some pilots. So that's where we are seeing the private sector coming quite actively in this agenda. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we have time for one last question. And I think the question that I'd like to raise, and this is more broadly for panelists. So the question is, how do panelists view biofortified crop seed systems as an influence to successful commercialization of biofortified crops? So it's a more general question going to biofortified commercialization overall. And here by commercialization, they also include scaling within public procurement. So, and I guess this is going to linkages in the background with key value chain actors like seed companies, certification, farmer awareness. So it's a broad question, but I'd invite panelists to respond just in terms of, I think it's a good overarching note to end our Q&A session on. So I'm happy to take two or even three panelists to respond to this question.
Yeah. So I think really looking at, I mean, to be able to move the needle in obviously large countries like where most of the panelists are there from, I think the mainstream player executive sponsorship becomes very, very important. And when I'm saying the mainstream player is definitely the policy and the government's getting involved in a very potent and active push. So that's where I would say, I mean, I feel quite encouraged with how the needle has moved to have involvement in the complete supply chain. While yes, in fact, I would tend to agree with Dr. Khwaja that we will have to really kind of involve, get into more communication and this at various levels. But yes, the traction has started, and I would say at the policy level, the government plays a very important role to kind of remove all the constraints up the weakest link. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I'd also like to invite Edna and Dr. Ahmad to also reflect on this question very briefly as we're wrapping up the Q&A. But over to other panelists. And Obe, if you have anything to add as well.
Please start you.
So, I mean, I can respond first, and I do agree with Anand. In Pakistan, till now, the response by the seed distribution companies has been very positive. And this is, again, as Anand mentioned, due to the government, appreciation or government acknowledgement that this is good, so it should be scaled up. And definitely Harvest Plus and GAIN has played an important part in the capacity building awareness sessions, which are still ongoing in the country. And I mean, these awareness sessions, communication efforts have led to, as I mentioned, almost 10% of the next year crop would be zinc biofortified. Secondly, we have also started the process of involving the government in a way that they give priority to the zinc biofortified wheat in the public procurement, as well as all other private philanthropy who use these wheat grain or wheat flour for distribution. So these two efforts would further help seed companies to motivate them, help them to expand the seed distribution of biofortified zinc crop.
Thank you. Edna, Obe, quick reflections, tweet-sized reflections from your side. You're on mute. Edna, you're on mute. Obe, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Linkages, to seed producers, especially in the research institutes here in Nigeria and everywhere in the world, as regards biofortification of crops, and then the distribution network and certification is quite obvious because it has to be put in place so that there should be a deliberate move to support those value chain of biofortified crops. And then there should be a proper monitoring and evaluation team on ground in each of the countries to be sure that the standards are not compromised and that whatever new findings are made and new releases of varieties that are made, it will be made public, through publications by the researchers. And at the end of it all, those findings will be able to get down to even the farmers in our local domain. And by so doing, we'll be able to build biofort systems and then follow up by government and the various states to be sure that all those things are put in place. It's also going to make the project to be more sustainable and adaptable in the various domains. Thank you.
Thank you. Obe, any last
Thank you.
words?
Thank you very much. As to me, commercialization itself starts with the proper seed system, because no seed, nothing to produce and create demand for. But I think we need to look at the incentive. Who is incentivized to do maybe the early generation seed? See the public space, and where does the private sector come to take? Maybe at the certified seed stage, and to have a robust regulatory framework which makes sure that come. When this is all together in Tanzania, it is there, but we haven't seen a lot of competition in terms of seed uptake with other companies. We are now trying to, through CBC, to introduce more companies to take shape, so that also can increase competition and make the prices maybe affordable in future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've teed up, the panelists have teed up a number of areas which are dedicated webinars in their own right, be it seed systems for biofortification, be it the issue of standards and regulation for seed, be it the issue of how public procurement can serve as a demand pull for seed production as well. So thank you all for all your critical reflections. This has been a very exciting conversation. I'd now like to hand over to Josh Knowles, who has been doing some really interesting illustration of the session to provide key highlights. And following that, Ijida is going to provide a quick wrap up. So over to you, Josh.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's great to hear you speak. Yeah, just to go through my picture very, very quickly. I started on the left-hand side of the screen with the provocation or the question, what's the impact in your country? And then I've gone across speaker by speaker, country by country, from Tanzania, India, Pakistan to Nigeria. And what's really coming through is the idea about knowledge gaps and educational pieces around the subject, which I've kind of drawn in this illustration. The incentives to put the biofortified foods into the supply chain, and getting the message out there is really sort of, that's what I'm hearing. So I've tried to put that in the picture, and then down here on the bottom right hand of the drawing, I have homegrown crops, and there's someone holding homegrown crops there, and people in schools being fed with the biofortified and enriched foods, and that's hopefully getting across the message. So that's my illustration. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. That was very nicely captured. And then over to Ijidai, and just to say what a pleasure it was to moderate the session today. Ijidai, over to you.
Right. Thank you, and good afternoon all. Good morning and good evening. So it was really an interesting conversation, and we're beginning to see that more actors are becoming aware of biofortified crops across the globe through Harvest Plus program and the Gain Harvest Plus CBC program. While the private sector, as we're aware, leads in production, processing, and marketing of biofortified crops, there's a limit to what the private sector can do. And if we don't establish policy frameworks within our countries, we might not really get the mileage we want to achieve. Although from the conversation, we can see that it's particularly interesting to see how policy and legal frameworks are improving food systems in different countries, from the school feeding programs to establishment of central distribution systems, inclusion of biofortified crops into safety net programs, and the incentives and subsidies government has been providing to value chain actors. Such success stories have further highlighted the need for an efficient public distribution and public procurement systems. However, we have also become aware that there's need for the supply chain to be strengthened, and there's need for awareness on biofortified crop varieties, seed varieties, and also the policymakers to be aware of the opportunities biofortified crops present to be included in existing programs. So what is the way forward that we have come up with? To briefly summarize that, we can see there's need for engaging government to come up with favorable policies that will strengthen adoption, inclusion, and consumption of these nutrient-dense staples. And how we can do that is through lobbying, presentation of facts, and that speaks positively about biofortified crops. There's also need for complementary policies that speaks both to demand and supply in different government programs, ministries, and departments. One of the key success stories from India and Pakistan that have caught my interest, and I believe it's also an opportunity for the CBC program leads and other partners that are promoting biofortified crops, is to see that we work with the government to establish a central distribution system. This would actually address some of the issues around price and availability of these staples. And then there's need for the whole partners to come up with a multi-stakeholders partnership approach, like setting up alliances that will focus on improving inclusion of biofortified crops into existing government programs. Lastly, communication and awareness remain key to both the public and private sector. This will ensure that these actors within this sphere understand the opportunity for biofortification and what roles they play in improving the food system. It's really great to have you all today in this webinar. At the end of this event, we would share the event recording and also issue out certificates of participation to all those that participated. And this is me saying thank you on behalf of Gain Harvest Plus and other partners. And I'll hand over to Gillian if there are other things that she needs to add.
Thank you so much, Ijudai. I think you have mentioned all that needs to be mentioned, and at this point, we'd like to bring the webinar to a close. But of course, thanking you all for making time to be part of this discussion. We have received a number of questions from you. For apologies for those that have not been responded to. We are going to send personalized emails with responses for the questions that have not been responded to. Once again, thank you so much, and we look forward to engaging with you further in future webinars and other activities around nutrient-enriched foods. Have a good day and a good evening and a good rest of the day to all.
Good evening, Julia.
Thank you, Julian.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much.